Now that we've learned about what parenthetical citations are, I wanted to kind of walk you through how you would use those in your writing. So I'm going to write a sample body paragraph and use parenthetical citations with my research so that you can see what it looks like. So here I have my outline, just like you have an outline. Here's my introduction information. We've already covered all of that. So down here is the outline for my first body paragraph, which is going to be about geography, one of the 3 subtopics. Within that paragraph, I've decided that I'm going to talk about 3 different things. I'm going to talk about the 5 geographical regions of Georgia, the weather in Georgia, and I'm going to talk about Stone Mountain a little bit. So down here, I have 3 sample note cards, and all of these have that information on here. We've got some information about the 5 geographical regions, some information about the weather, and then some information about Stone Mountain. And these note cards should look similar to your note cards. You should have the subtopic listed up here in the top left corner, geography, history, or culture. I'm writing my paragraph on geography, so all of my cards say geography in the top left. In the top right corner, you should have some clue as to which source this information came from. So on my cards, I've written georgiainfo.edu, World Book, so that's an encyclopedia, and Nicole Mitchell, who is the author of a book. At the bottom, if there are page numbers, I have the page numbers of that information listed, and then this is the title of the article that was from this website. So here are my note cards with the information that I'm going to be putting into my body paragraph. So to start my body paragraph, here's my sample paper, and we're going to talk more about the heading and the page numbers later, but this is what your paper is going to look like. I've got my introduction already typed in here. I'm going to start my first body paragraph, and remember, we want to keep in mind the paragraph sandwich that we learned about when we learned how to write a good paragraph, meaning you want to start with a sentence that introduces the topic of the paragraph, then you'll give your facts, and then you'll end with a clincher sentence that ties the entire paragraph together. So I'm going to start with a topic sentence. Georgia's geography is notable for being very diverse. There's a topic sentence. I've introduced the topic of the paragraph, geography, and I've kind of given a little summary of what maybe the paragraph's going to be about. So now that I've given my topic sentence, I'm going to start including my facts that are on my note cards. So first I'm going to start talking about the 5 geographical regions. And remember, the information on your note cards has already been put into your own words. So now you just need to take those facts and put them in your paper. And then we're going to give credit to the source, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's talk about the 5 geographical regions. I'll go over here to my paper. There are 5 distinct geographical regions in Georgia. Now that information, I didn't just come up with that out of my own head. I got that from this source, georgiainfo.edu. So I'm going to go look at my works cited page. Okay, here's my works cited page, and I'm going to find that Georgia info source. And remember, when we talked about doing your citations, you need to use the first piece of information. So this is my source that the information about the 5 regions came from, and I'm going to use the first piece of information on that source, which is the title of the article. We have to use the title because we don't have an author. So, geography introduction is what I'm going to put in the paper. And it goes directly after the sentence in parentheses. Now, if this source had page numbers, Like if it was a book or an encyclopedia article, I would put the page number right after this. However, it's a web article, so it doesn't have page numbers. So I close the parentheses and I put my period after the sentence. Okay, now I'm going to write my next sentence. So let's go back over to my note cards. And what do I want to put next? Let's talk about the coastal plain, which is one of the regions of Georgia. So the coastal plain is the lower half of the state and the coastline on the Atlantic Ocean. So in my paper, I'm going to say the lower half of Georgia is made up of the coastal plain. Now you might be wondering, do I have to put a citation after every single sentence in my paper? The answer is not always. If you have two sentences in a row that are from the same source, then you only put it after the second sentence. If you had three sentences in a row that are from the same source, then you would put it after the third sentence. Let me show you what I mean. So the coastal plain is the lower half of the state and the coastline on the Atlantic Ocean. So let me talk about the coastline too. So I'll put a period there. And I'll put another sentence. A small part of the coastal plain touches the Atlantic Ocean. Now both of these sentences that I've written, both of those facts, came from the World Book Encyclopedia source, the coastal plain and the information about the Atlantic Ocean. So, since both of those came from the same source, I don't need to put it after each sentence. I only need to put it after the second sentence because those came in a row. So this comes after the second one, meaning that both these sentences are from that source. Now, how do I cite the World Book source, the encyclopedia source? Let's go to my Works Cited page and look for the World Book, because remember, on this note card, it says World Book up here. I've reminded myself this information came from the encyclopedia. So on my Works Cited page, here's the World Book Encyclopedia. How do I cite that? Remember, you're not going to put World Book Encyclopedia in parentheses. You want to put the first piece of information that's given over here. And what is it? It's the title of the article. For this encyclopedia, we don't have an author, so we're going to put the title of the article. Let's go back to our page. And the title of the article was just Georgia. Now, this is an encyclopedia that we actually physically have, so it has page numbers. And I need to go back to my note card to figure out what page numbers I have. And I've got pages 174 to 176. So that's what I'm going to put in my parentheses. If you have the specific page number, that's always best. But for this note card, I put a span of page numbers, and so that's what I'm going to put in the parentheses. If you know the specific page number, then just put the specific page number. So here I've got the title of the article and the span of page numbers, but if I know the specific page number, I'll just put 174. Okay? So these two sentences in a row, they both came from this source. Now let's move on to the next part. And what I want to talk about next, let's see, I'm going to mention that the Blue Ridge Mountains are in the top right corner. This is going back to this georgiainfo.edu source. In the top right corner of the state are the Blue Ridge Mountains. Okay, so we've gone back to the Georgia introduction article. So if you look at your Works Cited page, here's Georgia introduction again. So I'm going to put the first piece of information, the title of the article, because we do not have an author again. Okay, now you might think this is a little bit repetitive, because we've already mentioned the geography introduction article up here. But because we inserted a different source in between, we have to mention geography introduction again. Remember, you need to tell your reader exactly where each piece of information came from. So every time you give a fact, you tell where it came from. Next, let's see what I want to start. I've talked a little bit about the regions in Georgia, so now I think I'm going to move on to talk about the weather, because remember in my outline, that's what I said I was going to do. I talked about the geographical regions, the coastal plains, and the Blue Ridge Mountains. Now I'm going to move on to the weather. So let's see. Let's start with the consistent weather all over the state. So I'm back on the World Book again, the World Book Encyclopedia source. Okay, although the state is made up of different geographical regions, the weather in Georgia is consistent throughout. So I got that information from my World Book, my encyclopedia source. So going back to my works cited again, I know that the World Book source, the title is Georgia. So I need to have the title of the article and the page number that that information came from. And we'll say that came from page 176. Okay, so next, I've mentioned the weather. Now let's give some details about the weather. All right, here we go. The weather is humid with an average of 49.74 inches of rain per year. Now this came from a source that I haven't used yet. A book by Nicole Mitchell is the author. So I'm going to write my information in here. The climate is very humid. Okay, climate's very humid. Most areas receive an average of 49.74 inches per year. Now, how do I cite this? Go to your works cited page, and I know it was the article by Nicole Mitchell. Now, this is a web article. It was found on the internet. However, I do have an author. So, I am going to put the author's last name. And then, even though this article was published on the web, I do actually have page numbers for this. So I'm also going to put the page number. And that matches, again, it matches my works cited page. If I go to my works cited page, the first piece of information given right here is the author's last name. I'm not going to put the title, because what I need to put is what's first right here. Remember on the sample that I gave you before, I had all of these things highlighted? The very first piece of information, that's always what's going to go in your parentheses. Okay? So for this one, I've got the author's last name and the page number. Now let's move on to a different piece of information. I think I'm going to talk about how, because it's close to the coast, it sometimes gets hurricanes and tropical storms. So let's mention that in the paper. Okay, so because Georgia is along the coast and close to Florida, it is often affected by hurricanes and tropical storms. Going back to my note cards, that information about hurricanes and tropical storms came from my georgiainfo.edu source. So we've used this one a lot, but again, we want to use the first piece of information, which is the title of the article. There are no page numbers because it's an internet source. And as always, the period goes after